Hello, my name is Niki Lemeshka, and I'm the Program Manager at the Georgia Commission on Family Violence. During the COVID-19 shelter-in-place orders, many jurisdictions have reported that the overall crime rate has fallen, while family violence crimes have spiked by comparison. Given that, I've been asked to provide a brief refresher for officers on family and domestic violence. Research shows that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will be victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner during their lifetime. We also see domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence or family violence, occurring in all different types of relationships, economic groups, races, religions, sexual orientations, professions, and ages. This may be a good time to address the fact that throughout this presentation, I'll most typically refer to victims as women and abusers as men. You're likely aware from your field experience that men do experience domestic violence in straight and gay relationships. But research suggests that 85% of domestic violence victims are women and 15% are men. My use of feminine pronouns in no way is intended to take away from the fact that men can be victims and women can be abusers. Bringing it back home to Georgia, our local numbers reflect nearly 62,000 family violence incident reports in 2017. Which resulted in more than 20,000 arrests. Georgia currently ranks 10th in the nation for the rate at which women are killed by men, and over the past 10 years, nearly 1,400 Georgians have lost their lives to domestic violence, with 166 of those deaths occurring in 2019 alone. Abuse can take many forms in relationships, from physical or sexual assault to stalking to emotional and psychological manipulation. All of these types of abuse have one thing in common. They are present because the abuser is seeking to obtain or maintain power and control over their partner. While some situational abuse may be the result of anger management problems, the root of domestic violence is widely acknowledged to be power and control. The image that you see on the screen summarizes some common tactics of abuse that we see within abusive relationships. We call this the power and control wheel, because regardless of which tactic the abuser uses, it centers on power and control over their partner. You may also notice while looking at the pie pieces or spokes of the wheel that physical and sexual assault are virtually absent. Instead, you see those two on the outer circle as the tire for the wheel. This is not accidental. It's helpful to remember that the day-to-day abuse a victim experiences is often not physical in nature, but rather it may be threatening, blaming, coercive, harassing, or intimidating in nature. The entire power and control wheel is held together by the looming threat of physical or sexual violence. If physical assaults are not recent, and even when they've been rare, they remain effective tools to remind the victim of what the abuser is capable of doing should the other tactics listed on the spokes become ineffective. Clearly, there are more tactics present in the behavioral definition of domestic violence or intimate partner violence than there are criminal remedies to address them. The statutory definition of family violence is more narrow in scope. Georgia's statutory definition has 2 tests, the relationship test and the violence test. It focuses typically on single incidents and criminal acts, while the power and control wheel focuses more on the reasons why this behavior is happening and the dynamics at play. Many violent relationships follow a common and cyclical pattern. The entire cycle may happen in one day, or it may take a few weeks or months. It's different for every relationship, and not all relationships will follow this cycle. For example, many victims report a constant state of siege with little relief. The first phase of this cycle is the tension building phase. Commonly, tension builds over domestic issues like money, children, or jobs, and verbal abuse begins. The victim may even try to control the situation by pleasing the abuser, giving in, or avoiding the abuse altogether. You may hear this described as the feeling of walking on eggshells. Unfortunately, the victim's efforts will rarely, if ever, stop the violence. Eventually, the tension reaches a boiling point and physical abuse begins. It's usually triggered by the presence of an external event or by the abuser's emotional state, but not by the victim's behavior. This means that the start of the battering episode is unpredictable and beyond the victim's control. Some experts believe that in certain cases, Victims may unconsciously provoke the abuse so they can release the tension and move on to the honeymoon phase. Most typically in this phase, the abuser is ashamed of his behavior. He expresses remorse, tries to minimize the abuse, and might even blame it on the partner as a way of deflecting his role in it. For this reason, I often refer to this as the manipulation phase. He may then exhibit loving and kind behaviors followed by apologies, generosity, and helpfulness. He'll attempt to convince the partner that the abuse will not happen again. And it's important to remember that from the abuser's perspective, this bargaining is often genuine. This loving and contrite behavior strengthens the bond between the partners and will probably convince the victim, once again, that leaving the relationship is not necessary. This cycle continues over and over and may help explain why victims stay in abusive relationships. The abuse may be terrible, but the promises and generosity of the honeymoon phase give the victim the false belief, the hope, that everything will be all right. For just that reason, family violence cases can be among the most frustrating for responding officers. I've worked in family violence now for almost 20 years, and I can tell you that this is also frustrating for advocates, but it's very important for us to all remember that leaving is a process and not an event. Research has revealed that the level of danger for a victim actually increases after leaving an abusive relationship. In fact, according to most studies, that remains true for a period of 6 to 12 months. This is one of the many reasons that safety planning is of vital importance to victims. Offender accountability and victim safety are two sides of the same coin and have to be addressed with equal value. If we want to address the problem of intimate partner violence, we need to ensure that both the abuser's actions are addressed and that the victim is connected with safety planning and support. In addition to your role in addressing an abuser's criminal behavior, it's also of vital importance that you act as a bridge to supportive services for victims. Victims can access confidential 24-hour support by calling either the Georgia Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-33-HAVEN or the local program in Atlanta, PADV, at 404-873-1766. I appreciate your time listening to this refresher, as well as the difficult work that you do. If you have additional questions regarding the content I just reviewed, you're always welcome to contact the Commission, and the APD Training Department is also available for follow-up information. Thank you, stay safe, and stay healthy.